Obviously, the pandemic has created a lot of uncertainty with long-range planning for the region. So from each of your perspectives, when it comes to planning for the region's future, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing? And Jay, I'll have you go first.
Well, thanks, Emily and Chris and the entire Des Moines Business Record team and all the sponsors for having us today. And Chris, thanks for sharing the DSM music mix. I encourage everyone to check that out on Spotify. So thank you for that. So I think, as an opening remark, I think it's important to note that, sort of pre-COVID, our region was coming in from a position of strength, right? And in terms of the last decade, in terms of population and GDP and job growth percentage-wise over the past decade, we've outperformed all of our regional cities surrounding us. So Chicago, Minneapolis, Kansas City, St. Louis, Omaha, Milwaukee, all of those markets we've outperformed over the course of the past decade. We've had all these great rankings, but obviously, as has been mentioned multiple times already, COVID-19 and events such as the tragic death of George Floyd and others have really created significant disruption in our region and in our economies and all of our organizations, private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector, went into major pivots and realignments. We did the same thing at the partnership, put together a short-term strategic plan, focusing on first 2 months, helping keeping businesses in business and people working, keeping the region safe. A DSM Forward initiative on top of that, with helping to put together playbooks to help our region reopen the economy in a smart, collaborative, and safe way, and then a new 18-month strategic plan. And I know all of you out there are doing similar things with your organizations as well too. But as Chris said, kind of talking about sort of the next normal. But as I sort of look at what's happened with COVID-19 and George Floyd and Rachel and so many other things, that it's really created this opportunity for a great reset, and to really look at things. Many things have been going great in our community before. We actually had a lot of challenges before as well too, but things were going so fast, didn't always take the time to really look at those. So, instead of thinking about a new or different normal, I think it's challenge ourselves to think about how do we create a better normal. And with disruption comes great challenges, but also great opportunity. And really, if you think about innovation is all about disruption. So disruption does not have to be a bad thing. And I would say that embracing disruption and innovation is a big part of what we need to do moving forward. And as we look at our strengths of a region, people have heard me talk before. I talked about the secret sauce. I don't think that secret sauce has really changed, right? We've been really good at regionalism. We've been good at public-private partnerships. We've had strong leaders, as represented on this call today, and so many others who have led the way. And visioning. Visioning is really important, and that's a big part of what we're talking about today. I think if you look at the history of these successes that we've seen as a region, it's great to see Dave Feehan on here too. He's been a part of some of those in the past as well, and great to have those history lessons as well moving forward. But every 5 or so years, this region has done a really great job of putting together really great, aggressive vision plans and implementing those. And so the last 2 have been Capital Crossroads 1.0, Capital Crossroads 2.0. And we have a really exciting opportunity in 2021 because we were scheduled to put together sort of what's that next big vision plan for our region. So there's been some discussions on what that could possibly look like in the process, but really that's all wide open right now in terms of what the name's going to be and the process and what the product's going to look like. But really, as we look towards those lessons of Capital Crossroads, in terms of why I think that was been successful, having worked on both of those, along with a lot of people on this call and a lot of others, I think we had really, there's sort of 4 points to that. One is, I always believe if you have a good process, you're going to end up with a good product. And so to have a really great grassroots initiative, and really that's embracing inclusion much more moving forward than we've done in the past. But we set records with our last vision plans in terms of the amount of public input that we got on those plans. And number 2, would be strong grass tops partnerships. So the last, Capital Crossroads was so much more than just the Greater Des Moines Partnership. It was Community Foundation, it was United Way, it was Catch Des Moines, Bravo, it was the MPO, on and on and on, with a wide range of grass tops leaders across our region. It was also a broader version of the region, 50 miles out. Regions are defined by economies, not by political boundaries, and to make sure we have that true regional economic focus. And then 4th was to make sure that the content is transformational and it's big ideas I do believe that Capital Crossroads 1.0 and 2.0 had a lot of those that have had a lot to do with the successes we've seen as a region. But we have an opportunity in 2021 to pull together as a region and really define what that future looks like for all of us. And what can we do with that better normal? What can we do in terms of being better in terms of sustainability? What can we do better in terms of being more inclusive? What can we do better in terms of being more resilient? And what can we do to be better at embracing disruption and focusing on innovation moving forward? And as my favorite quote is, the best way to predict the future is to create it, by Peter Drucker. And really that future is what all of us on this call and so many more in our region we need to include in putting together that next vision plan and put together that roadmap. And that's what we've done in the past, and that's what we're going to do in the future.
Thank you. Deidre, do you want to go next?
Yes. First, I'd like to thank Business Publications and all of the sponsors who signed on to be a part of this this morning. As we've talked about already, there are a great deal of challenges that exist, but there's also an opportunity for us as a community to rise above the fold. And so when we think about everything that's going on, I think for the most part, people have come to terms with the fact that this is going to be some work. Jay just mentioned a great deal of things that almost got me tired so early this morning as it relates to what's ahead. But, you know, when we think about the pandemic combined with the social unrest that exists in our community, combined with a derecho, we have faced some significant challenges as a community. But as so many have said so far, we're resilient. And so when I think about a challenge that's ahead of us, that I think we can all connect to, that we can all relate to, even the strongest among us, it's fatigue. That's our challenge. I mean, and so this morning I brought another exercise. Here's my pandemic right here. And, you know, here's the social unrest right here. And, you know, here is derecho right here. And some of you all have experienced your morning workouts, and anybody, no matter what, is going to experience fatigue over time as we're experiencing overcoming these challenges. And so what I would like us to think about is that we know fatigue is inevitable, but regardless of it, how do we get through it? How do we overcome it? How do we set up our employees in such a way that they can overcome the fatigue? How does our leadership ensure that they are best prepared to lead their staffs and their employees in the midst of fatigue? We know that we cannot do this alone. We've talked about doing this together for so long since this has started. But I want us to be mindful that we're all experiencing fatigue, and there's a way to get through it. There's a way to get over it. And I think that'll be our biggest challenge.
We really want to know where the pandemic pineapple is at, Deidre.
You know what? I
knew you would have
someone was going to ask.
Yeah, we'll have you explain that.
Compliments of Trader Joe's.
We'll have you explain that a little bit later, I think. So.
Of course.
I was going to say that she really put the power in Power Breakfast with those weights there.
Of course, that's my morning workout.
Jake, do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. First, I'd like to thank the Business Record and the sponsors, as well as my co-panelists. It's an honor to be with all of you this morning and in tackling these tough challenges. We have great opportunity, as many people have said so far, and I have the pleasure of serving as one of the members of the Central Iowa Water Trails, and Dan Houston said it very well in one of our meetings shortly after the pandemic started to impact us all. And he said generational projects are inevitably going to have challenges along the way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really true if you pair that with the saying that you don't waste a good crisis. And I think what people really mean when they say don't waste a good crisis is don't get caught up in the short-term pain. And to Deirdre's point, the fatigue can set in. But I think the key, Chris said it at the beginning of his comments, he said, keep your head up. And I really believe that in a planning effort, you need to take into account the short-term impacts and try and predict what portions of those are going to be part of our life in the future. I also have the honor of serving on the Airport Authority. And if you think about 9/11 and the impacts of that very tragic event, had profound changes on air travel. And those planning efforts are now part of our effort as we're planning the airport. But now we have the opportunity to get to plan that airport with everything that we're going to learn and have learned in the current crises. And the Denver airport wasn't so lucky as it relates to 9/11. They were done and had to completely redo their brand new facility to accommodate that. We have an opportunity in the region to take everything in, take this pause, and try and focus our efforts in a long-term planning, just as this region has done very successfully time and time again. I think that's one of the strengths. Jay says secret sauce. It's creating plans, it's setting goals, and then achieving those goals, and then resetting the vision. And I think with all the inputs that we have now from derecho and the pandemic and the social unrest, we have an opportunity to really reset those goals and make sure that we're aiming towards the right thing. I think pressure in a situation highlights places where you have weaknesses. And I think that's what all of these impacts to us right now have shown, is where we have weaknesses and opportunity to really grow as a region.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Good morning, and yes, thank you to Business Publications and the sponsors for the invitation to be here today, and for everyone signing on early this morning. I wish I had my weights like Deidre to get going, but I think I would start by, I think some of the greatest barriers moving forward, just to build up of what Deidre said, is exhaustion. And this connecting and juxtaposition between many in our community have been working on issues such as poverty, racial bias, housing instability, mental health disparities for a very long time. And this pandemic and the racial injustice has put a magnifying glass on that. But that doesn't take away that this is the level of exhaustion that people are coming into this time of urgency with. So you can see the long-term vision and the goals that have been there, but the wear and tear on many of our leaders and in our community is significant, which brings me to our broader issue of just overall mental health of our community and the stress that many are experiencing, the isolation, living paycheck to paycheck or no paycheck at all, and then the anxiety with just the vast number of unknowns before us. I think another barrier or opportunity, you can take it either way, comes down to trust. Desperate times either foster isolation or they foster connection. And one of the things I love most about this community, living and working here, is that people step forward together. We learn together, we struggle together, we build together, we pivot together. And I've seen that on a daily, hourly basis with our nonprofit community coming together to better respond to the current environment. But that coming together is only possible when there are relationships and networks of authentic trust. And I think we need to be clear with ourselves and with one another that there are many in our community who for whom that trust has been broken repeatedly, perhaps. And so that as we look to rebuild, reimagine, that great care and attention must be made to authentically building trust across our community and engaging deeply across our community. That is what's going to foster resilience. That is what is going to foster a better normal, a truer normal, if you will, and then allow us to really get busy and try to address these deep issues that have long existed, and that it's time for them to be resolved. So those are just a few thoughts.
Thank you. David?
Well, first of all, I want to say hello to all my friends in Des Moines. It's been, I think 2 or 3 years since I visited, and believe it or not, it's been 20 years since I departed for Washington to be president of the International Downtown Association. But one of the things that happened is I reached Washington, D.C. in 2001 was the unexpected. And I think that's one of the things I want to talk about this morning is the uncertainty. I had been in town a couple of months when all of a sudden 9/11 happened. And we had an annual conference we were planning in Pittsburgh at the time. And I wasn't sure if anybody was coming because you couldn't fly. So part of the issue that we've got, I think that's facing us this morning is the whole issue of uncertainty. We really don't know right now a lot about when the pandemic is going to end, how it's going to end, what the Great Reset, and Jay, I thought that was a term that you used, and I think a lot of people are beginning to talk about now, is this Great Reset. Is that going to happen, and what is that going to look like? So the question oftentimes is, I do a lot of strategic planning with downtown organizations, and we are often trying to be very vision driven. And I heard that, I think Suzanne, you mentioned that too, the issue of vision. But what we did with the Golden Triangle Business Improvement District in downtown DC was we did scenario planning. We did tabletop exercises because there's no way to know when you're in Washington what's going to happen in terms of a terrorist attack or a visit by some head of state or whatever. Those are the kinds of things that you have to build into your planning process, and that would be an important thing to think about. I've been advising downtown Minneapolis and the University of Minnesota for the last several weeks on their thinking about how they're trying to cope with this. And one of the things that's always impressed me about Des Moines is the quality of leadership. This is a town that has had incredible leadership for many years. And I'm hearing in Minneapolis right now, there's a concern about a lack of leadership, both of the public sector and private sector. So the fact that you folks are gathering together to do this is extremely important. I want to also take you back to another time of uncertainty. When I arrived in Des Moines, there was a great deal of uncertainty about what to do about downtown. The governor of Minnesota had said that if we lose the Minnesota Twins, we're going to be like downtown Des Moines, dead, dead, dead. That's a quote, unquote. And by the way, Jay, one of my favorite quotes is from that great philosopher and former heavyweight champion, Mike Tyson, who said, everyone has a plan until you get hit. And exactly. And that's, when the pandemic hit us and when the derecho hit, we all had plans, but were we really prepared for that? So that's an important thing to think about. Another thing that I think is important for Des Moines, when you look at your sister city to the north, I think Minneapolis, and I'm a native of Minneapolis, so I can say this, I think we were kind of asleep at the switch. We were getting very complacent. Things were going well. Downtown was doing well. The neighborhoods were being revitalized, but we were asleep when it came to the issues of race and poverty. And I think that's something that no city, including Des Moines, can afford to. I owned a house a block off of Lake Street, which is where the great deal of the burning and looting and everything took place, nearly destroyed East Lake Street. And nobody saw that coming. Nobody really, the city, the police department, nobody was prepared for that. So I think having plans in advance. I helped Pittsburgh get ready for the G20 plan or the G20 summit in 2010, I believe it was. And we went through a planning exercise with the secret police, with the state police, with the county sheriff's office, the local police. And we did a very detailed plan. And what we found was it was important. I mentioned 3 C's earlier. There was had to be a communication system put in place so that everybody knew who to call, everybody knew who to get in touch when something happened. You know, if it was anything from a hurricane or a tornado hit or a major demonstration, things blowing up, who do you call? Who do you get in touch with? The second thing was the idea of collaboration and making sure that all segments, public, private, community leaders were collaborating together. And the third was a coalition. Building a coalition was extremely important. So I just want to take you back for several years right now to the Major Projects Task Force and just mention that for a few minutes. At the time, there was a proposal to build a 10-acre under glass rainforest in downtown. And everybody thought, wow, that's really an impressive idea. There was a commitment to some initial funding for that. But what would be the price of doing that? And so the mayor appointed, I think it was a 30-member task force. We worked for about 16 months evaluating all kinds of possibilities and proposals. And what came out of that was a report that I think provided guidance for the community for several years, a set of priorities, a set of guiding principles. And as a result, what happened is every project except for the rainforest eventually got built. So it was a great credit to Des Moines. And I guess the final thing I would say is with Patricia Zengsheim, who is a former planner for the city of Des Moines, she and I just wrote an article for a journal in London about the transformation of downtown Des Moines. And it really lays out this whole story of how Des Moines evolved over the last 20 years. Keep in mind this, that Des Moines Development Corporation had commissioned a study by Dr. David Lawrence. And what he found was that downtown Des Moines pays $19 in tax revenues for every $1 in services it consumes. So you can see, if you want good neighborhood services, if you want a healthy downtown, if you want a healthy region, downtown has to prosper. And so it's vital, you know, to be aware of that. And when you start thinking about the people who need jobs, who need services, keep in mind that downtown is really the cash cow for the region, and it must be successful.